Huh? Have a donut. Have a donut.
These donuts are great.
Donut.
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 Donut!
Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut. Donut.
Hey, it's Shabes. Those are not jelly donuts, of course. Those are onigiri, or rice balls. Fans treat this infamous moment as an English dub going too far, trying to hide Japanese culture from an American audience. But nobody seems to bring up the scene before, showing Professor Oak in his whole-ass Japanese house with tatami mats and screens and tea and everything. The Pokémon anime was a very Japanese show, at least in the beginning, which was different from previous anime hits on American television, like Speed Racer or Star Blazers. Even if the Japanese writing all had to be covered up, or they had to adapt more than a few Japanese puns.
See? Maybe it's a counterpiece.
The English dub couldn't hide all the Japanese cuisine and fashion and architecture and cultural references that are in plain sight. It exposed our generation to Japanese culture and better acclimated us to anime, if only for a short while. Gradually, the Pokémon anime sands off everything that made it Japanese in favor of a more universal, broad, arguably generic culture. This video will explore some of the early anime's ties to Japan and explain why this quality faded away. Pokémon used to be Japanese! Since everyone already knows about the jelly donuts, let's start with the food. To give the dub some credit, they actually do call them rice balls in a later episode.
These rice balls are pretty good.
When you got lemons, you make lemonade. And when you've got rice, you make rice balls.
That's because you visually see Brock making them, and it would probably make things more confusing for kids to say that this is how you make jelly donuts. That's the methodology for many of the changes the dub made. Pokémon was a show for children, so they needed everything to be clear and easy to understand. It wasn't to shelter us away from a foreign culture, just make it more approachable. And this was not in spite of the original creators. They welcomed this. Pokémon almost never released outside of Japan, according to Norman Grossfeld, who was head of 4Kids Productions at the time.
Nintendo of Japan had very low confidence that Pokémon would work outside of Japan. The storytelling style was different than the way we tell stories. And I said, we've got to do this. I want to change some characters and how they do. We've got to ramp up the humor. I want to change the music. And they said, we trust you, go ahead and do it. My feeling was we had to do that so that this could become a mass market hit instead of a niche anime show that might appeal to more hardcore anime fans.
The show wasn't this Japanese out of nowhere. The anime's director, Kunihiko Yuyama, was specifically asked not to worry about an international audience at the time. So according to him, he based the anime's setting off mid-50s era Japan. Not every anime is this Japanese, or culturally rich. One of Yuyama's previous works, Minky Momo, made a conscious effort away from that content, in case it was brought stateside. This isn't a defense of the Pokémon dub. It's an explanation for why they did what they did. And clearly it worked because the franchise became a global phenomenon, for good reason. Pokémon as a concept is very appealing for many reasons that could be its own video. The collecting, the battles, the journey, the bonds you form, so all of that already worked in the anime's favor. Whatever changes were made in the dub didn't get in the way of that appeal. A simple name change doesn't change who the character is. The food functions the same in the story, whether it's onigiri or jelly donuts, or kashiwa mochi, or as the dub likes to call them,
ice cream sandwiches.
Now, it just so happens that kashiwa mochi is the signature food of Children's Day, a national holiday in Japan, of which this entire episode is about. The dub calls it Kids' Day, and this cultural connection goes unaddressed. But it doesn't change the meaning of why kashiwa mochi was brought up, which was to contrast Jesse and James's different upbringings.
You had off from school? And you had a pool and ice cream sandwiches?
Of course I did, didn't everybody?
Not me!
柏餅って柏の葉っぱだけを食べるんじゃなかったの？
そんなわけないだろう。
Yes, it's silly and blatantly incorrect to point at a rice ball and call it a jelly donut. Or for Professor Oak to say, "Oh, my pizza is here," when he clearly was cooking ramen in a previous shot.
Ah, there's my pizza. Coming!
But to get upset about these changes is kind of cringe to me. Ash and Misty, or Satoshi and Kasumi, still eat at a restaurant where one eats with chopsticks and the other with a knife and fork. It's not a big deal. In fact, it makes for its own source of comedy, which is what the anime and the dub were attempting to do anyway. As I said, Pokémon has a lot of intrinsic appeal, but I don't think I really appreciated as a kid how the Pokémon anime was mostly a comedy. That was the channel for much of this culture to make its way in, either through absurdity or irony, as a cutaway gag, or again, as puns.
座布団1枚遊んでる場合が
The most glaring Japanese culture in the show for me was some of the fashion. All the primary outfits of the main cast are both iconic and universal, arguably more Western than Japanese. But occasionally the characters would dress up or meet characters decidedly more Japanese. Ash's very first proper opponent in the show is a bug-type trainer named Samurai. There's a handful of these kinds of characters. Even 2 of the gym leaders wear Japanese-style clothing. But you'd more often see these stereotypes depicted by Team Rocket in one of their many disguises, such as an Oendan, which is a more stoic and intense type of cheerleading in Japan. Although they are dressed a lot more like Japanese delinquents, or what's known as bancho for men or sukeban for women. This subculture somewhat manifested as bosozoku, or Japanese biker gangs, which the anime also pokes fun at. And yet, none of these outfits require a translator note to explain the joke. There's a common understanding in broad categories like food or clothing. That's a construction worker. That's a thief. Those are farmers. American kids didn't really have to be in the know in order to get it. Even if you aren't familiar with the gyaru subculture in Japan, this scene of Team Rocket trying to scam our heroes is silly and fun. I'm not even sure what they're referencing in this episode, but they're clearly using a karaoke machine, which also originated in Japan.
It's Pikachu! It's Pikachu!
There's a number of bits that I recognize from anime, but I don't know the exact source. But yeah, when you put it all together, it is surprising how Japanese the Pokemon anime was. While I remember growing up around it, I actually missed out seeing it as a kid. I just didn't have the channel. So it actually wasn't until I had seen over 800 anime when I finally sat down and watched it, which made for a surreal experience as a dyed-in-the-wool anime fan. I recognized that style of Japanese house and Japanese school. I've even seen the back of cafes like this one in other anime. Gym leader Koga's whole-ass traditional Japanese mansion looks so cool, and the frequent uses of kotatsu, these Japanese style of tables with a heater and blanket underneath them, always looks so comfy. There's a whole 2-episode arc during Ash's 7th badge where they visit an onsen, which is such a common storytelling trope in anime because it's, presumably, such a common vacation for Japanese people. Not to mention that the Pokemon anime is very traditionally animated, by which I mean it uses a lot of the common techniques and iconography and language of Japanese animation in such a fundamentally appealing manner. Removing my bias towards it is difficult, but I'd argue Pokemon remains an excellent beginner's anime, both to acclimate towards the style of anime, as well as exposure to Japanese culture, which is inescapable from the medium broadly. We are really lucky that it took off the way that it did, and so many of us were introduced to anime this way. It's no surprise to me that it contributed to the success of making this stuff more known and accepted throughout the world. I wanted to avoid making this video a run-on list, but this next batch of Japanese culture does not come from broad, easily understandable categories like food or fashion or architecture. They are a lot more specific, so I'll take some time explaining them. The scene that gave me the idea to make this video was this scene of Ash's nose growing longer as he shows off his gym badges. It's a reference to the long-nosed Tengu, a Japanese fantasy creature. There's an expression, Tengu ni naru, or becoming a Tengu, which means you've become arrogant or prideful. So when Ash loses a battle, his nose breaks off. You may not understand the full meaning behind it, but it's still a fun visual gag to show how Ash feels. The Pokemon themselves reference Japanese culture. Meowth is designed off a Monarchy Neko figurine, which literally shows up in the anime too, and there's other sculptures like Daruma dolls and Hina dolls when they celebrate Hinamatsuri. That's its own entire holiday in Japan, and other Japanese-related holidays include Children's Day, like I mentioned earlier, as well as a Bon festival in one episode. In that same episode, you see ghost tags, or ofuda, to ward off spirits, and the ghost makes a reference to an old fictional Japanese detective named Taro Bannai.
ある時はハロー番内
Which, yes, was later appropriated in Cutie Honey.
またある時は花形レーサーハリケーンハニー
There's quite a number of ancient references to Japanese manga and anime that American kids would have never known about, including Kyojin no Hoshi, Time Bokan, and of course,
Post-counter punch!
Ashita no Joe. Even Rose of Versailles makes an appearance, which also serves as a reference to Takarazuka Revue, a style of musical theater in Japan where only women play every role. Other styles of Japanese performance art show up in Pokémon like manzai, two-person comedy, kamishibai, or paper theater, and kabuki plays, which the dub actually name drops.
A ninja mansion calls for a kabuki star.
And remember, you're not really expected to know any of this information. It's not necessary to properly enjoy the show, if there even was such a thing as proper. Perhaps fully would be a better description, but even then, you don't need to fully understand something to enjoy it. In episode 3, Pikachu and Caterpie have a conversation, told entirely in body language because most of the Pokémon don't speak our language. Viewers of all languages will never fully understand what is said between them. And that's okay. Their mannerisms and emotions are clear and universal. That's what truly matters. This scene actually reminds me of another episode where the Pokémon talk amongst themselves, only this episode also subtitles their speech. The Japanese version actually has more lines that are omitted in the dub, which represents a broader choice of this last category. The dub covers up or erases much of the hiragana, katakana, and kanji Japanese writing. Not quite all of it, but they really go out of their way to mask things. They even changed this 5-yen coin to a penny. While some early episodes also used English lettering like the gyms, the dub still had to edit them because the name of the location was different. This was all done with the blessing and encouragement of Nintendo of Japan. Eventually, the Pokémon Company International, which formed in 2001, enshrining the franchise as a worldwide brand.
And I want to rotoscope out every instance of Japanese writing on screen so that a kid in Italy thinks the show is for him. And it was made for him, so it doesn't place a nationality on anything.
So after the global broadcast of the anime started, you can see the anime gradually have less and less of these cultural identifiers. What might have been Japanese text would instead be gibberish or even English. Compare this Pokémon manual, which was edited by the dub, to this later episode manual where it's English from the start. The anime production accommodated so that the dub wouldn't have to make so many of these edits, although that apparently didn't stop them as far late as Advanced Generation, where the dub felt the need to replace this giant onigiri with a sub sandwich. The anime would still be genuine in its style, and no doubt they would sneak in a tiny reference or two. Pokémon as a brand could never stop being Japanese, of course, and you'll still see characters dressed and Pokémon designed off that same culture. But consider the first Pokémon region was called Kanto because it was based off the Kanto region of Japan. And yet the next 3 regions, that are also based off of Japanese regions, had to be called something else. And then they haven't been back since. I don't bemoan Pokémon incorporating other world cultures like French or British or Hawaiian. Cultural diversity is a strength. It's just something so charming about the early anime, how it injected Japanese culture so bluntly or casually, and the fact that it was seen all over the world in that state, in a time where anime and Japanese culture was more foreign, less accepted, which makes it all the more special. And so, our heroes learned a valuable lesson in Japanese culture, that calling onigiri a jelly donut isn't such a big deal, and that nothing truly beats the feeling of Thing Japan. Imamade arigatou gozaimashita. Mada mada tsuzuku!
青い青い 快な夜にはおいら一人で哲学するのにゃ